Okay, so let's take a moment to get our minds settled here by bringing to mind our motivation for showing up this evening. You know, why we're interested in looking at death and rebirth, what we can do to be sure to use the time well. So really try to set a strong motivation for yourself, and with the wish that it also ripple out to benefit others. And we can say the 4 measurables. Get rid of this. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. I think this class, or this topic, can really help us when we reflect on it, can really help us to recognize the habits we have that we're not really very comfortable having. You know, because if you're trying to reflect on what will it be like, you know, on your deathbed, what kind of regrets will you have? What kind of clinging will you have? You know, it can really help us remember that we don't know when that moment's going to happen. And so the best way to prepare for it so that we don't have so many regrets, and so we can loosen some of our clinging just for our own benefit, so we don't suffer so much. You know, it's, you know, being able to, you know, do what we can every day to, you know, encourage ourselves and remind ourselves the importance of, you know, thinking and speaking and acting from a place of mind that we value, that we think is appropriate. Whatever, you know, whether it's a work ethic or you know, a raising child mind, or, you know, just kindness and not wishing to do harm, all of, you know, the really finding that a method that can keep it, you know, in the forefront of our thoughts, instead of something that we almost never remember until after the fact. After we say something we regret, after we do something we regret, you know. So, you know, what can we do? So the idea is that if we remember how short life is, as all the old people here know, life speeds up, it doesn't slow down. We might slow down, but life doesn't. Life just keeps passing by faster and faster and faster. You know, it's really hard to believe, you know, that, you know, I find it very hard to believe 64 years have passed. When did that happen? You know, it's just like, really? I think I missed about 30 of them, you know, so it's just, I mean, I can't imagine where they all went. They say that one of the difficulties in raising children is that we tend to only remember things for 20 to 30 years, our personal feelings about things. So it's very hard to relate to our children when they enter into a certain stage of life, because we really kind of can't remember what it was like. And I now believe that. I now understand, because I remember less and less about, my childhood or my teenage years. I mean, I remember some key points, but I don't, it just a really much more vague thing. So, so time speeds up. So we want to use that knowledge that we have. We know this to be true. So we want to use this knowledge to guide us to make conscious decisions from moment to moment, not just year to year or birthday to birthday, or however, we tend to do it. Or like I said, or after the fact when we've done something that we really wish we had a better handle on. So, I know that, I really learned when my mom died how having something like that happen really changes, or while it's happening, really kind of makes it very easy to discern what's meaningful to you. I mean, all sorts of trivial worries literally just don't arise, So when you're, and that's true, I'm sure, for many people in many different kinds of circumstances. But it was really, as someone who's been an anxious person her whole life, it was really quite clear that during those months and for several months after, I wasn't so worried about things because it simply wasn't very meaningful, it was just like, who cares, So it was really very interesting. And we want to have that attitude for all of our life, of just really being able to zero in on what's meaningful and not waste a lot of time doing things that actually don't mean anything to us. And it isn't so much what it is, I mean, like we might still watch TV because we want to share things with, our partner or our kids or something, but so it's not really what it is, it's why we're doing it. And so a lot of the advice we get from Lama Zopa Rinpoche is, really this, that really trying to, and I think even maybe His Holiness was talking about this last week, really understanding we can take any activity that we do and turn it into Dharma, turn it into a practice by making our motivation meaningful. So that nothing that we do, because those things that we simply can't do it, we can't feel, maybe we shouldn't do. Maybe they're just so, unimportant to ourselves and the people around us, and our employer, that we don't need to do at all. So.
Wait, so when you say practicing Dharma, like I just want to understand it more. Like it doesn't mean just like meditating or saying a mantra. It could also be like being compassionate.
It's anything that it creates the cause for happiness and does not create the cause for suffering. So self-centered behavior creates the cause for suffering. Harming others creates the cause for suffering. Harsh speech, all the non-virtues, killing things causes suffering. So it's doing things for the benefit of others, So we might, we go to work, not just because it's a great job and we love it, if that's the case, but that because it's a benefit to others. Whether it's to our families because it helps us support them, whether our bodies need it because we need food, because nobody else is giving us food, and we need our bodies in order to be able to benefit others. So it's a matter of really taking the time to think about why we do things instead of acting as if someone else is making us. you know, like I go to work because I have to, you know, because that's not really true. There's always choice, you know. Does that make more sense, Faye?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the meditations in this module, and I think it came up in how to, it may have come up in how to meditate, it definitely came up in mind and its potential, is this idea of continuity of mind. You know, how can we help us consider the possibility that our consciousness has always existed and just taken different bodies from life to life to life to life to life. But as long, you know, that there's, and the premise in Buddhism for that is that for consciousness to exist, it has to have a cause that is congruent with the result. And since consciousness is not physical, according to Buddhism, then its cause has to be non-physical. So the body itself cannot be the cause of the mind. It is the support for the mind, it is needed for the mind, but it is not the cause of the mind. Everybody with me so far? So the substantial cause of a moment of mind is a previous moment of mind. And so one of the methods for getting our head around, getting our mind around that, since we don't grow up in a culture that says, of course there have been past lives and future lives, you know, to us it's like a, you know, are kind of a little nuts, you know, of course there isn't that, you know, science tells us it's just, but scientists haven't been able to find the mind. They find all sorts of things that support the mind, but they really haven't found consciousness. And the Buddha would say it's because it is not physical. So according to Buddhism, the mind that enters the fertilized egg in the womb of our mothers in this life was preceded by a moment of mind in the intermediate state, which was, you know, preceded by several moments of mind until the last moment of mind from the previous life. So the moment of, you know, so one of the recommended meditations for it is to try to go back in your mind using your imagination and some of your memories to kind of try to go back into the stream of consciousness, sort of like taking a train that, you know, back in time through your life. And then you have to use your imagination, you know, to kind of go back. And so and this is really just, if we don't have any, you know, some people have memories of previous lives, you know, when, at least when they were children. But if you don't have any, if you're like me and have zero, you know, this kind of exercise, mental exercise, can help us at least open the door to that possibility. And the reason that's important is because karma really only makes sense if that's true. If everything we experience in this life, we created the cause for, everything. Think about how many things that is. Have we had time in this life to do that? How do children get harmed? Children get harmed in life. And so the Buddha just says, well, they didn't create the cause of this life. It was in previous lives. So it's kind of trying to, you know, understand that we want to at least keep the door open to thinking about this. in order to be able to fully appreciate the teachings on karma. Again, it's not a matter of trying to believe it. We sort of can't prove it's true, and we can't prove it's not true. You know? Yes, Jack.
Can you prove anything is true?
Well,
or is there just evidence that things are true?
I'm sorry?
Or is there just evidence that things are true?
No, well, we can say it's true that I'm wearing clothes because it's a valid consciousness to say this is clothing. Because conventionally we agree that covering the body with fabric is called clothing. You know? So we can, you know, this isn't about, you know, having, you know, Buddhism's not about shaking our valid cognitions at all. It's just some things, because we don't have we have obstacles at this point to having the proof. You know, they say that, but if they say if you when you develop calm abiding, you'll be able to remember some of your past lives, because one of the obstacles will be gone, which is forgetfulness.
Well, I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that most things we think we know, we really can't prove, but we believe them just because there's a lot of evidence. I mean, even like in a trial with a jury, you don't prove anything. There's just a whole bunch of evidence.
Well, we can't prove guilt or innocence in the sense of the mind. Again, because we can't see the mind. But it isn't that I mean, and granted, we're still trying to work out the physics of the universe, all those kinds of things. But I don't think we want to get to this idea that, oh, we can't prove anything's valid. The Buddha did not say that. He said, what confirms existence is a valid cognition. You know, our valid cognition of slapping our face and knowing that, ooh, I hit something there, is enough to prove that I'm sitting here with a face. You know, so because the Buddha's not interested I mean, we have to remember the Buddha's teachings are all about how to get out of samsara, not to explain samsara, not to explain the false appearances of samsara, but to explain how things actually exist so that we no longer grasp due to ignorance and the delusions that arise from it. You know, so the teachings focus on this aspect of trying to understand, and this is one of those things, until we have a lot more ability, we can't see the ins and outs of karma. I mean, we can't prove it to ourselves, and we can't, you know, we don't remember our past lives until we have a better control over our minds.
So do we do that meditation of imagining past lives to imagine like what we could have done to get the karma we have now?
Well, that's part of it. So I can lead us through one, but you know, this I'm borrowing from Venerable Renee, who led us on one recently. It's a different thing, class, but I just wanted to kind of explain before, because we can't do it super effectively in a group where you're being led through it, because you can't pause where you need to. You know, it doesn't give you adequate time to do it, but it'll give you an idea of how to do it. Okay, and so one of the purposes is to, you know, I find it very optimistic, because you know, the teachings on karma say that the cause for a precious human rebirth is having practiced ethics and generosity in the previous life, and then at the time of death we had a mind that was a condition for a positive karmic seed to ripen for this birth. So, do y'all want to hear the meditation? If you don't, you know, you just, you know, turn off your camera. I won't know. So, but so the purpose of this is to keep our minds open to this possibility that the cause for this moment of mine is the previous moment of mine. And this continues before the birth of this body to the beginning of, there's no beginning, for always.
Wait, so does that mean like, because you know how we talk about impermanence?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but the mind is permanent, right?
Yes, but it is eternal. So
mind-
that's a big thing in Buddhism is, you know, we use the word permanent, and our connotation in English is that means it's also eternal. In Buddhism, it doesn't. In Buddhism, permanent means it doesn't change. So the mind changes, it is momentary. It arises from moment to moment. It causes the previous moment of mind.
Okay, makes sense now.
Okay, and it's eternal. Yes, Graziella. You have to unmute.
So, can you change your sort of the previous moment of mind is similar, and it gives rise to the next moment of mind.
It's similar in nature. It's
Right.
a moment of awareness.
If you're trying to change your karma, I'm saying it wrong, but can you change that so that you don't continue on the same track necessarily?
You know the answer to this. We talk about it all the time.
I wouldn't be asking.
Well, think about it. It's what we're always talking about. What's the point of meditation? To change the mind.
Reframing, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's because it's not that a moment of anger has to give rise to a moment of anger.
That's right.
It's that a moment of anger has to come from consciousness. So there has to be this continuum of awareness or mind for any state of mind to arise. But we have a choice in every moment of where we want to direct it. Right now, according to the Buddha, because we're stuck in samsara, we are out of control. Our minds are out of control. We are being pulled around in our activities of body, speech, and mind by our habits of mind.
Venerable Tendron?
Yes.
Can you hear me clearly? The internet's a little choppy.
Give it a go.
Okay.
You might want to turn off your video.
I may have misheard, but it sounded like the mind is impermanent but eternal, right? Is that what you'd said? Just
Yes.
want to make sure. Okay.
Yes. The body is impermanent and not eternal. Now you can talk, if you go down to the elements of the body, you could say those are eternal in the sense of, what is it? Matter doesn't go to, I don't know. That's physics, I don't know.
Cannot be destroyed nor created.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Buddhism agrees with that has always been the components of material things, of physical things, and there's always been the components of the non-physical mind. And those, and so the form of that, the physicality, the physical things come together in our experience, is a manifestation of our karma.
Sorry, say it again. I missed that. Sorry.
So a lot of this stuff, I can't cram all of this in this course because a lot of it is from different courses. So some of it just requires thinking a lot about, okay? So, and this is what the topic of the next course is about, a lot about, is karma. That since we can't experience anything that we did not create the cause for, even the appearances in our existence are related or dependent arisings from our actions in the past.
What do you mean by the appearance? Appearance of what?
This world.
Oh, like how we see the world.
And how it is. Yep. There's no creator other than our minds. That through the force of our mind and the force of physicality, we create a world that looks like this. And there are many worlds, many universes, depending on the karma of the people who abide there. I know it's a huge view. So think about that a while.
Venerable,
Yes.
Consciousness and awareness are synonyms?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we have 6. We have the 5 that are dependent on our physical sense powers, the 5 that we call senses. So we have nose awareness, ear awareness, tongue awareness, body awareness, ear awareness, and mental awareness. Okay?
So for people who are like, I'm just curious, like people who are like disabled, whether it's mentally or physically, does that mean Buddha considers them not fully having all the consciousness?
Right. Yeah. If you're born without like a functional eye, then your eye awareness does not function in this life. It's considered a gross consciousness. Like if you're born blind, then you just don't have that awareness. Now it can be for different reasons. It could be because, the eyeball doesn't work, or it could be because the connections to the, brain, sending those messages through the brain doesn't work. It doesn't mean, that you never could have it. It just means in this life, because it's dependent on a physical body part, you don't have it. So think about that, son. So keep some of this, just write down your questions, okay? All right, because it takes a lot of thought. All right. So, so this idea of being able to consider the possibility that the mind has been continuous, each one of us has our own continuum of awareness or consciousness. And according to the Buddha, it's always existed and it will never cease. So if we don't want to continue suffering like we do in this existence, we have to work on our minds because we are creating the cause to suffer. And so that's what the next course is all about. Okay? So this meditation is about trying to get our head around the idea that our consciousness is eternal. Just to keep the door open, not, it's not magic. You're not going to do. So anyway, so I'll give you the method, but you'll have to do this at your own pace, on your own time, in order to really get at it. And it's helpful to do it a lot when you make this, okay, I'm going to give this a go for a couple of weeks of really trying to think about it, at least for a little while, most of the, if not every day, more often than not. How about that? So, okay, so take a moment to kind of get settled in your seat, to get your back straight. And kind of check in with your body. Just scan it to see if there are any spots that you're holding tight, and try to allow your breath to release those spots. And when you feel ready, allow your mental attention to zero in on the sensation of the breath going in and out of the body. Not worrying about what thoughts might arise, what images might arise, but not following them, and instead focusing on that sensation of the breath. If your mind is super distracted, it can help to do the 9-round breathing. When you realize your mind has been pulled away, just very gently go back to that sensation of the breath. Let your breath be your anchor. Your body sitting here be your anchor. Holding it from going to anything other than what you're doing right now. And you can relax your attention on the sensation of the breath, knowing it's always available if you realize you've been pulled away, to help bring you back to what you're doing right now. So the Buddha said consciousness is something not physical. It's like a space for our thoughts, our different states of mind to arise, our ideas, our images. It's like a mirror. A mirror reflects whatever arises. We could say that a mirror takes the aspect of whatever appears in front of it. The mind takes the aspect of any thought, emotion, mental image. But the mirror seems to be stable, and whatever it's reflecting changes. But the mind changes from moment to moment while reflecting, while taking the aspect of different thoughts, different emotions, all the different states of mind. The mind keeps on changing. And at the same time, the mind knows, it cognizes, it is aware. It knows the thoughts, the states of mind. When we observe the mind, our awareness is looking at the previous moment of awareness. We can try to see our consciousness from 5 minutes ago to an hour ago, and back and further back, like we are traveling on a train back in time. These are just words, and it's like chocolate. You have to taste it. You have to see it. You have to experience it. The substantial cause of the mind is a previous moment of the same nature. And it has a cooperative condition, the body. Once one's body dies, it doesn't act anymore as a cooperative condition for that consciousness. So the consciousness leaves the body. So imagine you are traveling on a train back in time. There will be flashes of memory like the light when you come out of a tunnel. Sometimes there'll be a bigger memory which has some emotional content, kind of like arriving at a station. So try to recollect memories along the way. Going back to earlier today, to last week, to Christmas time, to last summer, to 5 years ago. Who were your friends then? Did you have the same job? Did you live in the same house? Back 10 years ago, 15 years, was your family the same? Go back to school. Maybe your first day of high school. Who were your friends then? Or your teachers? What did you like to read? Go back to elementary school. Did you feel differently about school? What were your parents like? Maybe you have a first memory. Go back to that. When you were a toddler, maybe it was before school or preschool. Did you have brothers and sisters? Remember what your family was like, or imagine what it was like. Imagine your moment of birth. Imagine what your mother looked like. Now imagine your body getting smaller. And now you're in the womb of your mother. And you're getting smaller and smaller. Imagining arriving in that womb. And then the previous moment being the last moment of the intermediate state, the bardo. Imagine yourself as a young human, a girl or a boy, in a similar form to this life. You have a light body in the bardo. Imagine going anywhere by just a thought, looking for your parents, trying to find a place you're attracted to. Then go back to the last moment of your previous life, where you were also probably human, with a peaceful mind, a condition for ripening a positive seed for a precious human rebirth. Imagine being satisfied with your life, not clinging to your family, wishing that they be well without you. Imagine your partner of that life, your children, your brothers and sisters. Have you lived a long life? Imagine what kind of job you held, kind of work you did. What things you might have been interested in. Imagine having children or not. Imagine being a young adult. Different friends, and family members different from those in this life. Imagine what kind of habits of mind you have, what drives you. Imagine your teenage years. Imagine your birth and your mother of that life. And then shrinking again, going into the womb of that mother. Entering those cells, that fertilized egg. And then your life in the bardo, again, probably in a human form. Searching for your parents. And then going back to the last moment of your mind in your previous body, on your deathbed, with a different body dying, with different loved ones, different memories from that life. Feeling satisfied, not too afraid, appreciation and gratitude for your loved ones. Ready to let go of this body. And imagine that body dying and that last moment of consciousness traveling to your Bardo body, traveling to the parents you're attracted to, landing in the womb of your mother of the next life, a moment of birth, having all the activities of body and speech and mind of that life, imagining your death in that life, letting go of all your loved ones, leaving that body as it fails, going into the Bardo, your previous life before this one, searching for your parents, finding them, entering the womb of your mother of this life. A moment of birth. A mind confusion, entering into the world again. In this tiny little human body that you don't know yet. A mind that thinks it's connected to every part that it sees, feels, hears, tastes, touches. And then come back to this moment, sitting here, meditating on the continuity of mind. Allowing your attention to focus on that sensation of the breath going in and out of the body. Allowing it to anchor you in this moment. Noticing any spots of tension in the body. Allowing your breath to release those spots of tension. Observing your thoughts in this moment. And then when you're ready, gently return to the group. So do we have any novelists amongst us? You find it easy to imagine? So Venerable Renee was talking about, what we want to try to get to be able to do is to go back 10 lives, then 20 lives, then 100 lives, then 100,000 lives. The Buddha said that there is no beginning because he could never find a first life when he was going back with his memories. But before we have, if we don't have any ability to remember our previous lives, this really is just about trying to keep our mind open to that possibility. Because whenever we close the door, we don't give it any thought again. And that can become an obstacle to other aspects of the teachings. And this is also a good way to kind of think about how our habits of this life, we brought a lot of them with us. So imagining what our previous life is like will be different in form. There'll be different bodies, there'll be different loved ones, there'll be different this and that, but what we're attracted to will be similar, depending on the conditions of that life. We can feel confident that we've had a series of probably precious human rebirths in order to be able to meet the teachings in this life. Because of, we have to have had this habit of, practicing positive mind and positive speech and positive activities of the body. Any comments?
After the meditation, it just feels like, I don't know, not many things are important because it feels like in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
It's so minute.
Right, and it's easy, now that we know a lot more about the physical universe, or think we know, whatever, so, we have a sort of an idea of geological time, how many billions of years it took, for this universe to be created. I think one countless eon is the time, in the sutras and things, in the teachings, one countless eon is the time it takes for a universe to come into being, disintegrate, and go out of being. So when we say it takes 3 countless eons to traverse the paths of a bodhisattva, meaning that you've got on a path, it's a very long time. So yeah, we want to really have this sense of we've been doing the same thing again and again and again and again. And we have a tendency to really grasp onto moments as if they're a very big deal, especially if we don't like that moment. Or we really like the moment. When it's really just one of billions, trillions, gazillion moments. So while we want to use our time well and consciously, we want to be intentional about the choices we make and recognize which habits of mine are not skillful and which habits of mine are skillful. Encourage ourselves in kindness and love and compassion, patience, wisdom and generosity. We don't have to freak out with every mistake that we make. It's a process of trying to observe our thoughts, observe our habit energies, choose to interrupt those that we think are very unskillful, and practice it over time. and they'll become new habits. So it's not that habits are bad. We just want good habits. We want habits that lead us to happiness, not to suffering.
Mhm.
So worrying about the loss of this body, so it can give it, a little bit of perspective on the possibility that when we have to let go of this body, it's not that we're going to cease to exist. Our habits of mind, all the imprints we've placed on our mental continuum in this life and all previous lives, that remains on the continuum of consciousness, on the subtle consciousness that goes to the intermediate state, then goes to the next life. So when we imagine being on our deathbeds of this life, we can imagine, our aspirational prayers to be born in a pure land, soak up the Dharma like we're a sponge, or have another precious human rebirth and continue developing habits that lead to happiness, lead to being able to truly benefit others. All those things that we discover are really meaningful to us, we will have time to keep making those habits stronger. So at the time of death, as our body fails, and so it can't support, even, our gross consciousnesses, it can't support sight or smell or taste, all our awareness of our senses, because the body's failing. And if our death is drawn out, these things will be obvious to others as well. But there is a moment when our breath stops, our heart has stopped, and in our culture, we consider that the time of death. But our mind is still undergoing, it's becoming more and more subtle. All our conceptual mind, our ability to think, all that fades away. And it's just the very subtle mind that goes to the next body. If it's a spontaneous birth in a lotus at a pure land, it goes straight there.
I have a question. You talk about the intermediate state. Like, what does it feel like? Is it a nice state to be in, or is it?
Depends on what your rebirth is going to be like.
Oh.
You're in the form of whatever, like a juvenile form of whatever form you're going to be born into. So if you're, a human, it's like you're a 5-year-old child. That's how they describe it. You're in a light body. So it's not substantial like this one, but you don't have any, you don't need, you can just think of a place, go there, you can, so you can go to Paris, whatever, but you don't have any kind of, you're being pulled around by your habit energy, like your karma, so it's like what you're attracted to.
Is it like you become like a spirit?
No, it's more substantial than a spirit, but less substantial than the body you're going to take in the next life.
You're just kind of floating around the world.
Being dragged around by your habit energy, by what you're attracted to. So like they explain it like if you know, say you're a butcher, this is their example, the Tibetan example, you're a butcher, you know, and that creates a cause for you to be reborn as one of the animals that you have, you know, in the body of an animal that you slaughtered in this life. Okay. And so you're going to be attracted to, you're going to be in this little juvenile cow body, say. And, you know, you're looking for your future cow parents.
So the intermediate state is when you're looking for your parents.
Right. So
Okay.
if you're born in a Pure Land, you don't need parents. It's just called a spontaneous birth. So you just go straight from this life to the light body of a being in a Pure Land. So if you're born into a hell realm, I believe that's a spontaneous rebirth.
And the timing of how long we're in that intermediate state?
It's individual. It can be no time at all, virtually, you know, or it can last up to 49 days is what they say. The end of every 7 days, they say you have a little mini death, but you know, because you haven't found your parents, but within 7 weeks you will find, I mean, you know, you'll be born.
Is it dependent on like your karma?
Yes. And what you're trying, all of that, you know, the karma of your, you know, how quickly you meet your future parents, that you're attracted to parents. So it's so it's not definite how long you'll be in the bardo. And then the process of going from, you know, when the body has stopped to the time that the subtle mind is released from that body varies also depending on, you know, great yogis can use that time to meditate on emptiness because the mind of clear light at the time of death is very similar to emptiness. So they can work with it. And so they might stay in that state for weeks. In the monasteries, they don't move the body until there's signs of decay because the person may be in a meditative state. And so they have stories of teachers who didn't decay at all, and this is in India, mind you, for weeks. You know, they're just so it's just, yeah.
Sorry, when you say they meditate on emptiness, like, what is that like?
That's a big question. We'll talk about that some other time. You know, it's meditating on how things actually exist as opposed to the way they appear to us to exist as somehow concrete, solid, fixed, permanent, that kind of thing. So all of this kind of explanation is really foreign to most of us. You know, it's completely not of our culture. It sounds bizarre. We can't imagine leaving someone who's died for weeks without touching them. You know, our health laws wouldn't allow it. You know, one of my earliest memories from living in the nuns community in Australia was one of the guests that had come to the retreat center that we shared the land with, Chenrezig Institute, died. And the person who found her called whoever you call, the EMT or whoever, you know, I don't know what the word is in Australia, what phrase they used. Anyway, once they come, they have to take the body. I mean, that's, you know, and they do whatever they do in Australia. And so this senior nun who worked, when she did work, she worked for a hospice in Brisbane. And she said, just to, remind you, death is not an emergency. You don't have to call EMT. You can wait. So we have time to do lots of prayers. So we did prayers until in the room until they showed up, but you said, so, if you're certain that they are deceased, then it's okay to not call anybody, except for the nuns, to have them come do prayers. Because while the consciousness is still in the body, it's an excellent time to do prayers and help that consciousness be more peaceful, ease their transition. Because if you have the merit to have a bunch of people saying prayers for you, it may have an effect in your conditions for your future rebirth. It won't have any effect on what seed ripened, because that happened. But it has an effect on the completing conditions, the environmental conditions, the resources, etc. And also just the peace of mind of the transition.
So you mean as in if they, whatever rebirth they have, it's already determined, but
the moment of death, that last moment of gross consciousness, with the thoughts and emotions or whatever, is the condition for the seed to ripen for your rebirth. So that's already started. That process has started. It's the state of becoming. And then the next state, the birth, is actually in the bardo. You're born into the whatever bardo being.
but the prayers are for
the conditions of their future rebirth. All the trappings. So, like if you're born in a peaceful area, not a war zone.
Venerable, if
Yes.
you're a Buddhist in the United States, so how much flexibility to have all these accommodations to your way of
It
seeing?
just depends on the state you live in, on the hospital, if you die in a hospital or at home, what the laws are about for funeral homes when they come to take the body. It's really variable from state to state. So you have to, that's one of the ways in which you prepare for death, is to find out what's true where you live. Most states have a law about that's 24 hours at the maximum. Most hospitals will not allow that because every bed is, their income. I mean, that's not really the reason, but they need the bed. So it's really about finding out those kinds of details. But in this country, usually you're limited in what you can do. So there's some advice about things like making sure that when you have to touch the body, you touch the top of the head first, because the crown of the head is supposed to be the best, because that's where the central channel, all your subtle channels and winds, can exit. That's the best place to exit from. So if if a doctor or nurse, I'm sure it's not a doctor, comes in to check to declare the time of death, they have to check they have to check for a pulse. And so you can ask them to touch the crown of the head first before they check the pulse. Or ask if you could do that. Those kinds of things. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of make the conditions better, but when this is our karma that we live in a place where there are all sorts of very regular, rules around this, and for good reasons, for health reasons. It's not just, to dictate to us what we can do. But it's quite interesting to hear the stories of, the deaths of teachers in monasteries where they don't have these, they don't call because the Indian authorities also take the bodies away right away. But in the monastery, the monasteries are restricted places because they are not Indian residents. The Indian government allows them to be in exile. And so you have to have a special visa to go there, all these things. So they have, they just don't alert the authorities right away. And I think they even cremate, they take care of the bodies on their property. So. So the more peaceful we are, the more that we're, kind of like, okay, next moment, whatever, and the more relaxed we are, that we're not ceasing to exist, we're just going to the next body, the less, agitated or disturbing the transition will be. Because it reflects the mind. And of course, we want a positive seed to ripen. And that's really just about trying to, the more we habituate ourselves to, not thinking negative thoughts. If you're in the habit of always grumbling about someone, especially about others, but also about ourselves, if your mind tends to be really, I don't know, what's the current phrase? Snarky? I don't know. We're always just kind of like in a judgmental kind of mind, then at the time of death, we're probably going to be there too. And that's not a good mind. It's not a mind we want to have ripen our seed for the next life. We really want, the more we can just practice having, compassionate, loving, kinds of minds, or at least not, not being on that roller coaster of up and down, but being more even. The more we can, develop that habit, then the more likely it is at the time of death. And yep.
All right, I have a question. So let's just say in our past life or when we were babies, we planted a seed of negative karma.
Then you wouldn't have been born a human.
Wait, no, as in my question was if we had planted a seed at some point in our life.
Well, we planted many, because every thought places a seed on the mind stream. Every moment of thought.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we have gazillions of imprints and things on our mind stream. Okay. You moved on the picture. I was looking in the wrong eyes. Anyway, so to have a human rebirth, it has to be a positive seed ripen. Because it's a good rebirth for the mind, for being able to work with your mind. So some people don't have precious human rebirths. But anyway, you'll learn more about that in karma. Because it's all about karma. Yeah, Jack.
So when you do purification, one of the things that you're asking is that it gets rid of all of your misdeeds. Does it actually do that? Or
no, only emptiness. Realization of emptiness is actually the only thing that that finishes all those seeds. But when we purify, the stronger our mind of regret and our mind during whatever remedy we've chosen, and our mind of resolve, our reliance on the teachings, our reliance on our compassion for sentient beings, all of those render whatever actions we brought to mind you know, and the, you know, of harm we've done in this life. And, you know, like I said, it's good to always just go, and any others that I can't remember in all previous lives. You know, so like you can imagine that with our distracted minds, our purification practices aren't as powerful as, say, someone like His Holiness. You know, so that affects how much it weakens the potential of that seed. But if we really have a strong mind of regret, a strong mind, all of those 4 opponent powers, what we've done is we haven't removed the seed from our mind stream, but we have rendered it incapable of producing a result. And the more we do that in this life, like tomorrow is a great day to purify, you know, because it's like 100 million, you know, everything's multiplied by 100 million times. And then they said because it's an eclipse, it's by 700 times more than that. So it's like 700 million. These numbers I can't get my mind around. But this is because we're talking about beginningless time here. You know, so these numbers aren't so outrageous. And this is what it says in the Vinaya, the basket of discipline of the Buddha's teachings. So, so every day is a good day to purify. That's why it's recommended to do it at the end of the night before you go to sleep, you know, to just whatever things you did that day that weren't skillful, to regret it and, you know, purify it with a practice. And mostly make the resolve to try to do better for whatever length of time you can imagine being able to succeed. And the strongest thing, of course, is this regret and then the resolve. So, but, so yes, those habits are also good. But at the moment of death, purification's too late. You know, what we want is a mind that feels at ease. You know. But being in the habit of every day doing a practice, like reciting the names of the 35 Buddhas, you know, reciting Vajrasattva at night, or even just reflecting on your day and visualizing, you know, the Buddha in front of you, radiating, purifying white light and having it enter through the crown of your head and purifying your actions of body, speech, and mind. The idea is to, because our minds can be changed, we really want to believe that we can change our habits, because not believing that is an obstacle. It's an obstacle to having genuine regret and genuine resolve. You know, if we think we can't do anything about it, there's a hesitancy. Yes, Tali.
Well, you said something that clarified something for me before. You said, because this teaching of every moment of mind arises from a prior moment of mind, I never quite understood what that means, because I start to think that it locks you into mental moments, like a moment of anger leads to another one, leads to another one. But then you said that it arises out of consciousness. So it arises out of the same nature.
Right.
Okay.
It's just that every moment of awareness produces the next moment of awareness. What is in that awareness can be completely different. What state of mind is it's reflecting.
Right. So then, according to Buddhism, then what would be a mental tendency? In other words,
our habit of being, say, judgmental. Say you have the habit, whenever you meet new people, to be judgmental in your head. That's a habit. You know? So you meet someone new, you know, and your habit is to assess what they're wearing, their voice, what they talk about, you know, and it's, you know, some people have a habit of being really friendly to people and really, really are thrilled to add another person within their, world of friends. And others are really, judgy. and then you have all the things in between. So that's an example of a tendency. Now, if we know that about ourselves, we can interrupt that tendency. And as soon as, we've sensed going there, I mean, at first it's just, oh, I've gone there in one thought, and you just stop it. You try to stop it so that you don't have two thoughts or three or four. So the tendencies are the results of our habits. So it's like, this is why we carry them from life to life. So when you see small children having a very strong personality trait, Buddhism would just say that's their habit from previous lives.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we, every seed that's put on the mind, all these tendencies produce a result. Every moment of mind produces a result. So it's both those things. We have the tendency to do it again, and whatever it was is going to produce a result. So like the result of being judgy is other people will also be judgy of you.
If you have a person like Hitler, one can predict that a person like that will not be born in a precious human life.
They'll go straight to hell.
Oh, so Buddhism does have hell.
Oh yes, it has. You wouldn't believe the number of hells. It's just that it's not permanent. You'll have, you will exhaust that karmic seed, and then some other karmic seed will ripen when you've exhausted that, and you'll be born in a different, you might go to the animal realm, you might go to the human realm. It just depends. Yes, Hernan.
Could it be that the mind that is a human being on an opportunity does all these bad things and comes back as a human being, but it's gonna have just like so many unfortunate events coming up on their path?
That's later, after you've gone to the hell realms. We will discuss all this in karma, because there are 4 results of karma. If it's a complete action, which we'll explain then, that has the power, that action has a power to produce a rebirth. It's strong enough to ripen at the time of death and project you into a particular kind of life, okay? If it's not a complete act, well, and then there are also, so even and complete action, so say you've been a mass murderer in this life, so that sends you to hell, okay? And then once that exhausts, if you've killed 6 million people, it's going to take a very long time, okay? But then it finally does exhaust, because the consciousness never ceases. So, eventually, that seed will exhaust. And then when you're reborn as a human in some future life, Hitler was born as a human in this life. He has seeds of ethics and all those things. He couldn't have been born a human without it. So he has also those actions on his mind stream, those tendencies and seeds. So, but when he's reborn as a human, he's likely to have the tendency to kill again. He's likely, or he may be killed. He might kill someone and then get, the death sentence, or get killed back, whatever, somebody else shoots him. But it'll also have terrible conditions, it'd be really hard to have good health, all sorts of things, and it can take several of those. Karma, the effects of our actions, they say it increases. In a sense, it's just that there are lots of consequences from our actions. So it's like, think of like, say, one day you just lose it and you yell at your boss. Well, you lose your job. That's one consequence. Then you run out of money in the bank. That's another consequence. Then, so there are lots of, maybe you lose your partner because you lost your job, So there are lots of consequences from actions. And the heavier they are, the more consequences, whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing. So that's the kind of thing we'll be discussing in the karma module. It's exciting. The good news about karma is it's not fate. You know, it's that it's explaining what cause and effect has to do with our mind, how our mind affects what happens in the future. You know, because it's a mind that drives all of our actions of speech and body. So when we catch on to the fact that the mind is changeable, we can change the tendencies that ripen as suffering, the things that harm us in the future. It gives us all the power. The Buddha is saying we have all the power. Our ignorance of how things exist is our obstacle, our main obstacle. So until we realize emptiness, we're kind of stuck in samsara, but we can improve the seeds we're placing on our mind stream by interrupting our negative habits and changing them, replacing them with good habits. So being in a hurry isn't particularly an effective strategy. But Tantra is supposed to be the fast path, but you have to have lots of good conditions to be able even to meet Tantra and then to practice it at an effective manner in order for it to, you know. So they say that I think when you meet Tantra, you know, at most it'll take you 17 lives to become enlightened. But that depends. You know, mostly what His Holiness says is in this life, we're creating the imprint, we're creating the cause to meet them again in the future. You know? But that's a start. Hey, you got to start where you are. So how are we doing? There's a lot to discovering Buddhism. I mean, it's a complete package of teachings. It's not, you know, it's like any religion, you know, there's lots of information in it, you know. And it's similar to, I think, all world religions in that our behavior of body and speech matters. You know, how we treat each other matters. And the good news is we've created the cause for having a precious human rebirth. We can do it again. They say what did I hear recently? I can't remember. Maybe somebody else remembers it. Jack, were you there? No, are you listening to Venerable Renee?
Yes, I heard the one where he did the regression a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, this week he said something about, you know, like Lama Yeshe says, if you sincerely go for refuge at the time of your death, you will not go to the lower realms. If you have a mind of compassion, you will definitely not go to the lower realms. If you, meaning the animal realm, hungry ghosts, hell realms. If you have a mind of, if your teacher, if you have, a strong confidence in your teacher, you will not go to the lower realms. I think that's what he was talking about the other day. So all of these ways of thinking protect our minds. Because those you know, obviously a mind of compassion or loving kindness is a positive mind. That's a positive condition for a positive seed to ripen. You know, it's not a distorted mind like attachment or aversion. So it may be contaminated with ignorance, but it's not a harmful mind. It's a positive mind. So, and then, you know, having confidence in your teacher, that means there's some, you know, you're trying to learn how to create the causes to benefit others. So, you know, that's a very positive mind. You know, and you're not displaying arrogance that thinks, oh, I do this myself. Well, you haven't so far, so maybe you want to rely on, you know, someone else. So it's like, you know, so it's just this, you know, this desire to be able to keep cultivating a positive mind, you know, and no harm and all that. Just that desire is enough to keep us from the lower realms, but not for selfish reasons. You know, just because it's, you know, we want to be like that because it helps others. It makes our, you know, everything better. Does that make sense? Sort of, maybe a little bit. So it's not like you have to have a particular Buddhist belief, but you do have to have a positive mind. No. Is everybody as tired as I am? Da-da-da. So anyway, so we'll end here. So now, you know, feel positive about your efforts tonight. You did this really strange regression, but it's not a regression in the sense of trying to, you know, actually remember our past lives. It's really about just trying to, you know, understand this idea that maybe consciousness is beginningless and endless. Being able to remember your past lives is the result of accomplishment of, you know, levels of concentration. You know, so this isn't about hypnotizing ourselves and remembering past lives. You know, it's about keeping our minds spacious, open. Okay. But so, you know, so we're trying to keep our minds open. This is a good thing. We're trying to do it so that we harm others less. You know, all these things, these are all positive motivations. We want to suffer less. That's, you know, why not? You know, that's just wisdom. So, you know, so we will dedicate. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, so thank you very much for your efforts. Next week will be the last death and rebirth class, and then we'll start karma. I'm going to be teaching, I think, 3 nights on karma, and then Don Hendrick will be here, and he'll be teaching the last 3 nights of karma and doing a practice day. So that should be good. If anybody